and I wanted you to take a minute this morning to talk about why it's so important that we not stop at 5.
Oh yeah, it is. It's so critical to provide care for our children to the point that they need it. And that's a pretty broad statement. And I'll be honest, recently, just because last week I had been up in Sacramento and met with the Commissioner of Insurance and so on, and we decided that we should come back and take a look at how the different states and how the different insurance companies and how also the different, in California, the regional centers or Department of Developmental Services fund our kids. And the intent is always, of course, that when a law takes place, or let's say these insurance mandates, they go through state by state, the intention is always the same thing. We want to be able to provide the medically necessary treatments for all of our kids, no matter where they live. But it often gets interpreted quite differently and incorrectly, I should say. And as a result, then all these caps are placed. Like right now, we're having an issue in New York where there's a cap of dollar amount, and that is really not, the federal laws won't allow caps, because otherwise, if you do put a cap on it, then there's no equality or parity in regards to the treatment of autism and any other disorder, and there has to be parity. So I remember years ago, to be honest with you, when first the Arizona mandate was written, and that was one of the very, very first, I came back and there was a cap of, I'm trying to remember, I think it was 50,000 up to the age of 8 or 9, I think, and then 25,000 from the age of 10 to 18, or 16 or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but there were caps associated with age. And I remember the very first thing that Bryce Myler, who's our resident expert, said to me was, well, this isn't going to hold up. Like, there's no way that's going to happen, because federal parity won't let this happen. And she was so right that, and the fact that the legislature didn't know what Bryce knew is actually why they passed the mandate, right? And then we come back to find that they can't. And they had to, of course, remove the caps, and it was fabulous. And so I'm pretty sure that this situation in Maine, I don't think it'll survive. I'm not sure. The fact that they're going in with a bill to expand means that families have been having problems. And to be able to really, to be honest with you, thinking of cutting services at 5 is so ludicrous.
It's cruel to me. It seems cruel.
It's almost like, we're going to give you like dental care. We're going to give you a root canal, and we're going to do everything we need except for put the actual cap on. And so it's kind of like we're going to spend 2 years or so treating your child, but then in their last year where they really need it, just as much as the first few years, but I mean, to be able to actually have an active, adaptive life after that, we're going to pull services. So 5 is a pretty, I don't know where that number even comes from. It doesn't make any sense at all, right? But reading some of the literature around what just happened in Maine, I think what the governor was trying to do there, or so it is implied in the articles, is that he was trying to improve the state mandated coverage in a way that people would actually turn to the state mandated coverage and not private insurance coverage. So I'm not sure if he had good intentions, if he was really ignorant about the treatment of autism. Either one would not surprise me, I don't know. But what I'm saying is that I find that a lot of people, I'll give an example which is sort of just as horrific, I suppose. A lot of our children, I was looking the other day and noticed that the vast majority of our children, we have very large number of kids, right? We have about 1,000 kids on insurance alone. And when I look at their numbers, it scares me, because I see that the vast majority are getting lower than 20 hours a week. And when I look at reasons and so on for denial, just yesterday I met with a family that had gone through pretty much every bad thing that can happen to a family. Very fabulous family, which, by the way, at some point you should also talk to them. But wonderful people, and have 2 children, and have gone through crazy ride with Kaiser. denying them coverage for both kids. I mean, really ridiculous stuff. But regardless, when you look at it, you realize that almost all the kids out there, even though there is a mandate to cover them, they're really not getting enough. And even if they are, they're cut very rapidly, and the excuse is usually not medically necessary. And so it all boils down to the definition of what is medically necessary, and there's a lot of subjectivity around that and a lot of arguments and discussions around that concept. And the fact is, ABA, you know, even if you divide it into two types and say it's the early intervention type is supposed to be very comprehensive, all of that is medically necessary. Every aspect of it, every hour of it for 3 or 4 years is medically necessary. And even when it becomes focused, which is a lower amount of intensity, then all of that is medically necessary. And what's really unfortunate is that I think in the field itself, in the behavior analysis field itself, people are not really understanding that 40-hour a week, or that 30 to 40-hour a week is the gospel.
It's a prescription.
It is a prescription. It's a dosage that's very, very important, and you can't just randomly assign lower hours to our kids.
There's no science to show that lower hours is effective. This is what I don't understand.
It's unbelievable. This family yesterday, so this is now their, I think, second child. First child is only receiving 10 hours a week, which I don't understand at all. And I said to through the regional center actually system, because Kaiser has just given them the runaround. And I talked with the family, and the dad was saying that the provider who's providing these services to them, who's a vendor of the regional center, family asked the provider and said, would you please ask for more hours on our behalf? Because this is a child who's barely 4. He's not even 4 yet. And the provider said, to be honest with you, I don't think that there's any case that would justify more than 5 or 10 hours a week of ABA. And that's a BCBA who said that. And that just makes me really angry.
That makes me really angry too. And I want to say to all the people at home, we need to start calling those providers out. And there's a great way you can do it on Love My Provider.
That's right.
Start calling those providers out. Go to lovemyprovider.com. Call those providers out so that families don't vendor with them.
But the problem I have, Shannon, is that a lot of families don't even really realize.
They don't know.
Like when I look at our families, I mean, we have 200 kids we're starting right now, right? Because we have a massive wait list, and I really felt bad about it. So I basically, as Sangam says here, we started the SEAL Team 6 or something, and we have a whole ton of people doing intakes right now and starting all these families. And the families are saying things like, well, I don't have time. We don't really have more than 10 hours of availability, and even though we have more funny, and we want to, we also want to do things that are fun and kind of stuff like that. And so they will never give us more than the very minimum in terms of availability. Are you kidding? I can't even get families to pull their child out one time per month for 2 hours to come to clinic.
Okay.
Out of school.
We have work to do.
Oh, we have work to do.
We have work to do on all ends of it. And meanwhile, we have viewers who would give everything they have to have that opportunity, to have the opportunity of more than 10 hours, to have the opportunity to go to a clinic with people from CARD.
Right.
So we need to all band together, solve these problems case by case, individual by individual, and educate everyone.
Right.
I'm right back on that awareness. We do need more awareness of what works and what we can do. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to rapid fire go through a bunch of questions, because at the bottom of the hour, we're going to give Dr. Granpeesheh an opportunity to talk about a new way that we can maximize learning opportunities in a way that's really fun and gives you an opportunity to do, whatever it is you have to do. Open the mail, maybe cook dinner, maybe get the dishes done. It's exciting, so stick with us. Welcome back to Autism Live. This is a very special day here. It's the last day of April, so we wanted to do this big. We're starting with Ask Dr. Doreen. Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is here. She's answering your questions. We're thrilled about that, and I want to get through as many of them as I possibly can today. I want to start with a long series of emails that I've been having with one mom this last week, and there were many, many questions, and I'm not going to go through all of her questions, but to a very fine point, she wants to know what the benefits and the drawbacks are to inclusion. And we had Dr. Mike Dorosian a couple of months ago talking about this, and one of the things that he said that really struck me that I never really got before was this idea that good inclusion is amazing and we should all be fighting for that for our kids that can handle it. But his point to me was good inclusion doesn't exist in an awful lot of places.
It's true.
That made me sad. And here I've got a mom, and she's saying to me, my gut instinct is that her child is in a special day class. He's not being pushed. During recess, he's not talking and interacting with other peers, although he can. She's asked the teacher, can you address this? The teacher has said, I have 15 kids. I can't do more.
This, yeah.
Right? But everything that she's saying, my cautionary thing is that it doesn't sound like to me that this school can even do a special day class, let alone good inclusion.
Right.
So when a parent is faced with that, she sees a child who's just, they've already identified that he's 2 to 3 years behind, but he's very capable. What can she do? Does she fight for the inclusion? Does she leave him in the special day class, or does she start looking for another school?
Okay. So this is, it's one of those questions.
Can I say this before?
Sure.
We have not taken the time today to say and remind everybody, no one can give child-specific advice within the confines of the show. So having said that,
yes, of course,
it would be a disservice. But go ahead.
I won't be, and I'm not really responding specifically to this person, this mom, but I think that you yourself and this mom, if you step back from it for a moment, you'll have the answer.
Okay.
So what is the reason that we do all this intensive behavioral therapy? Why do we do it?
Well, for me as a parent, I want to take the obstacles away from my child so that he can do all the things that he wants to do, whatever that may be, without an obstacle that prevents him from being able to access what he wants.
Exactly. So being able to access the things in his life and, have sort of integrate into all the things that are in his environment could also be called what? Inclusion.
Inclusion, exactly.
So the issue of inclusion is one of our endpoints. It's one of our goals. So now you go back and you look at the spectrum of kids on this with autism, right? And you have some children that are very severely affected and then some children that are very mildly affected. And hopefully every child goes from this end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum, or as far as they can go.
Yes.
Okay. So, and that's with good behavioral therapy and other things that we all believe in, medication if necessary and dietary and all these things. Now, if you are doing this and the child is, as they progress, right, they age into school age, right? So initially, and that's why I like to get kids so early, because you really want to just have as many hours as you can with the child yourself. Yeah. Just at, intensive ABA, teaching them and trying to catch them up. That's what you're trying to do, catch them up. So if you start to get into school age, 3, 4, 5, depends on the state you're in, and you start integrating in. Now, your choices vary from special education to regular education, and then there's a whole bunch in between. So you can have special ed being the most restrictive, and that different types of classrooms. Obviously, at this point, I think the majority of the classrooms are non-categoricals that are mixed or autism classrooms, but within the setting of a regular ed school. So very few schools are full autism or full DD schools. They still are there. Yeah. So that would be probably the most restrictive, and then the next one would be like a classroom which is special ed with some pull-out into the regular ed. The next one might be, reverse. So you're in a regular ed, but you pull out and reverse into special ed at certain times. Now the next one might be you're in regular ed, but you have your own aide, or you have an aide that assists you and 3 other kids. And then the next one might be you're in regular ed and you have your own aide. And then the next one would be you're in regular ed and you don't have an aide. Right. And that's sort of the steps, the hierarchy of going from most restrictive to least restrictive. Right. And the real answer to your question and for this family and any family is, where does your child fit in best, right? All the kids are very different. So I might have a child who does best in special ed because really they're the delays they have, they're not really ready to benefit at all from regular ed. Or I might have a child who's going to definitely benefit from being in the regular ed with an aid.
Yeah.
Or I might have a child who's benefiting from going back and forth. It depends.
Yeah.
It really depends on the child. And it depends on the quality of integration. Of course, it has to do with the aide who is with you. You know, an aide in school is not someone who is just watching over you for safety purposes, or just. I've been to schools to observe my kids where I've seen the public school aide outside having a cigarette. I mean, there's horrible programs for inclusion, and then there's fabulous programs for inclusion. We're very involved with inclusion at CARD, right? I mean, that's our life. We go in with our child. We don't care. We're doing everything from, I mean, our inclusion program even has a stage change where we go from a known aid to an unknown aid, so the child doesn't even realize there's someone in the classroom for them.
Right.
And then we graduate, or most of the time the kids figure that out, but still. And we'll even have aides in the classroom who are helping the teacher in general and not trying to focus on our child. But I mean, we will do everything to make it a shaping schedule so we can gradually fade out. So the answer is really, you have to look at your child and always place them in a setting that is slightly above what they're capable of, so that they can learn and they can grow. The benefits, obviously, of getting your child into the fully included is that they are, you know, accessing everything that's typical around them, and they're modeling from other kids who are typically developing, and that's what we're shooting for. The downside to being in special ed, obviously, is other children will also require a lot of attention. Other children will be acting out in millions of ways, and you will have that as a model. But hey, the upside to special ed is you get a lot more attention from one-to-one attention than you would in a regular ed program. A lot of our kids can get lost in a regular ed program if they don't have their own person. So you have to kind of figure out what is more appropriate.
Okay. And that's not an easy thing first to determine, but I think her gut already is telling her what she thinks should happen. But then figuring out the way to make that happen is a whole other ball of wax.
Yes, it is.
But I know, and you have said this to me before, what are we doing and when are we going to give up? And, you know, we don't give up.
We don't give up.
We don't ever give up.
And, you know, I'll be honest, like, no matter where we are, and, you know, CARD's all over the place now, and so we have a much bigger, stronger presence in California. Obviously, we have, I don't know, 14 or something clinics in California, and we're growing, but wherever we are, even if we just have your family, one family in a state, we will go to bat on this.
There you go.
And we will go and talk to the school, meet with the school. All of our supervisors do this routinely. They're involved in the IEPs, they talk to the schools, they will really get on your side and help you with this. But parent advocates are also extremely helpful. FEET groups, and if there are any in your state, are very, very helpful. In California, obviously, the regional centers actually provide advocacy for this sort of thing.
Yep, it's time to armor up and get ready to go in and as we say, get your dress dirty. That's what's going to happen. All right, we're going to take a short break and come back with another question right after these messages. Welcome back to Autism Live. Because this is the last day of the month, we're doing a special expanded show, a total of 3 hours today with some really incredible guests. This hour, Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. Next hour, Dr. Andrew Levinson. And then in our third special hour, we're having David Humphrey. This is an amazing opportunity to ask 3 incredible experts in this field important questions. And we are going to get back to the questions for Dr. Granpeesheh, but we also wanted to give her an opportunity. In this 3-hour special, we're talking about things that are hot, advances in the field of autism. And when I asked you, okay, what's exciting, what do you want to talk about, you said to me, and I was surprised, but I thought it was really wonderful, you said games. So tell us why this is what's exciting for you.
So it's funny because, you know, a long time ago, before I even had children, there was a dad of one of the kids that I was treating who was trying to show me some computer stuff and how he was trying to get his son to pay attention to them and learn from them. And this was way back, you know, and then my kids grew up, and of course with my kids, you know, there were discs and you'd pop a disc in and it was like Elmo doing a bunch of stuff. And I realized very quickly how much kids love to learn from these things. I mean, it was easier for my children to learn, let's say, alphabet from Elmo than from me.
Yeah.
You know, the way we learned it, right? So it had always been a thought of mine, and the biggest thing with games for me was that I see the changing sort of environment of funding, and I saw it with all the school district funding and the regional center funding, of course, which was at some point covering 100% of kids, and now it's down to 30% of kids, and I know the same thing will happen. It's already happening with insurance coverage, and so I worry about the children out there who are really benefiting from these programs, but we always seem to have to prove, even though, you know, everybody knows ABA is effective, the Surgeon General has said all the mandates are supposed to cover it, it's still, it really isn't effective when you do it at 10 hours. Right. It really isn't, and that's what really concerns me the most, because I'm afraid in 2 years, with the data that's coming out right now, we'll look back and say, oh, yeah, it didn't work. Let's get rid of this, you know, and it works, but you have to do it intensively.
Yeah.
So all of that said, I, you know, just thinking, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? I suddenly realized, and plus, of course, it's costly, right? So you want to try to reduce the manpower required for this. So I suddenly thought, you know what? We're not a gaming company, but we have some really very smart people here. And you're about to meet one of them, who's just an awesome guy. And to be able to present games to our kids, build games or applications or games that they can play. Because look at, you know, it's funny, every time I do an intake, the child starts to tantrum or something. They get bored, and the first thing the parent pulls out is an iPad, you know.
Screen
Sit
time.
Down, here's your iPad.
It's the multi-purpose answer to everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, or in the car, long trips or whatever. You know, I was sat in my Flex, which is my family car, the other day, and I was sitting in the back seat, and I was like, I don't think we've, like, in the last year and a half, 2 years, even used the DVD player in the back, which is in the seats.
Right.
You know, I was like, whatever, we're not going to need that anymore.
Right.
So, and that's the truth. People don't use DVDs anymore. Everything is on an iPad or a computer or whatever. So we started to take the very early lessons, the ones that are just a presentation of a stimulus. So they're like, you know, touch this or whatever it is, touch red, touch green, touch an object, touch pen, touch whatever. And then we realized, well, I learned a lot from these gamers. And as you know, Shannon, we have actually a gaming department of the coolest people in the world. It
is the most incredible place to visit.
They're the best. And I'm so glad they're on the main floor, you know, because like you go in and everybody loves the gamers. Yeah. They're just fun, cool kids. And but what it is then I learned from them that there's multiple things you do on a device. Right. You don't just touch. You can also drag and drop, and you can also, there's a bunch of different things.
Yes.
They taught me these different, so you can sort, you know, and there's other aspects. So we picked 4, I think, and CJ will tell us more about it. Christopher Miyagi, who's going to come in shortly and talk to us about the stuff they've designed. And so we picked a whole bunch of the initial basic games, and we picked 4 different types of engines, or like, you know, types of games. Right. And what the team is doing is they're loading them up, and they're on iTunes library, and they're awesome. And I mean, maybe they're not as fun as they could be, because there's spectacular stuff out there these days. But let me tell you, if you have a child and you give them this game and they're sitting in the car driving and doing nothing or self-stimulating, this is a much better thing, because they will learn these concepts.
Yes.
And that's what we're doing. We're trying, and what's built into the game is the discrete trial format. Yeah. So it's the presentation is done exactly as a therapist would present. And it modifies itself based on your response, and it allows you to pick reinforcers. I mean, we should let CJ so he can actually show us.
We should show it. But I love the concept of we're maximizing our time in a way that the child is ultimately reinforced.
And hopefully, we're doing research on it right now, but hopefully this will actually reduce the overall intensity that a child needs in terms of funding.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's a huge advance. All right, so we're going to take a short break. We're going to bring Christopher Miyagi in to talk with us and show us. He's been on the show before, but it's a really fun. Camp Discovery is the name of the game, and you can download it for free. So you should try it today. But stick with us. We're going to take a break, and we're going to bring Christopher in so we can show it to you. Welcome back to Autism Live. We're so thrilled that joining us in the studio now we have Christopher Miyagi. and you are the director of game development. Is that correct? Do I have that even remotely right? Correct me.
The creative director.
Creative director. Goodness, I apologize, leaving out a wonderful title there. And we've had you on the show before to talk about Camp Discovery, which continues to grow. And we were just talking with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh about how amazing these kinds of tools can be in the kids' hands. So walk us through. We have a way to share it with our viewers at home. What do we do with this program, and how can this be of use to us?
Okay. I'll start from the beginning for people that are unfamiliar with it. There have been a lot of improvements and additions since the last time I was on. Camp Discovery, I think as Doreen was just saying, takes a lot of our early curriculum and puts it into a game.
Yeah.
And so we have 10 lessons right now, with more coming. We have objects, body parts, emotions, community helpers, numbers. And in all the lessons, we have
There it is. It's, first of all, let's say it's visually beautiful. It's so stunning. I want to go in and play and go to these different places because it looks like a map and it's places to go.
Yeah.
So I think most kids are going to recognize this. They tend to, and do you agree with me, Dr. Granpeesheh? Our kids, we put this in our kids' hands and they immediately know what to do. It's like it's instinctive with them.
Somehow.
Yes, somehow they do.
do.
I always have to have my son explain my smartphone to me. He knows more about it than I do. But so for the parent end of it, though, what is it that they're learning when they're, what kinds of, you mentioned body parts? Yeah, show us one.
Yeah, I'll go with, so objects is a lesson, and then we have the different levels. So we have matching identicals, matching similars, we have sorting and receptive, and some of these different levels will be for the other lessons as well. And so I'll start with matching identical. So this starts with a, like a preference assessment, and so the child will pick the different animations, and we record which ones they choose the most, and so we replay those as in between trials
as reinforcers. So the child gets to pick what visual they like.
Yeah, and what's remarkable about this is that when they get the right answer, they're going to get some more of what it is that they like.
Yeah.
Which a lot of games that you have for children, they don't see what the child likes. They're just going to give them a random thing that happens when they get the correct answer. So I love this, that it gets really child specific.
Right.
And so right now, tell us what you're doing.
So we're playing through objects, and it's going to randomly select 3 objects to begin with.
And right now you're matching the objects.
So this is matching identicals.
So initially he matched with one object out, and now there's a distractor out. So it's very much the same as what a therapist's presentation would be.
And so it's that errorless learning that we talk about before on the show. First, there's no possibility of getting it wrong.
Right.
So we're ensuring that the child gets it right. As long as the child continues to get it right, it will then make it harder. But if the child doesn't get it right, it goes back to the last place where they got it right. Is that correct?
Yeah, or it'll give you a variety of visuals, like it'll make the object bigger.
Okay.
That sort of thing.
So like if I got it wrong, or if I just waited, right now it would go from this size to the bigger size.
So it's helping me to ensure that I get it right, which we know is an important aspect of learning.
Right.
Yeah, I mean the app market is so flooded with all these education apps and increasingly more autism apps, and so when we started developing this, we had to think, what can we offer that's going to, not only differentiate us but help kids, in a more efficient way. And so we really incorporated as much as we could from all our clinical background into the prompting, the error correction, the reinforcement, to make it just a better overall learning experience for the child.
And what's fascinating for me about this is that it actually is completely mirroring what the experience would be if there was a therapist that's there. A lot of times parents will read a lesson in skills and they have problems with manipulating what you guys refer to as the stimuli.
Right.
When I watch a therapist be able to keep a child in a chair and they've got the 3 things and they they deal them out and they go, which one is this, and they pull them up and they shuffle them out. That's the overwhelming part to me, is getting the stimuli down.
Well, and getting the stimuli down in the correct order.
Yeah.
And that's what's the most important thing. It's funny because I just did a review of a child via long distance web, and I was looking at the therapist and I was like, they're not doing the 7 steps correctly. They're just not doing. They're skipping forward. And the steps are essentially that you will, just like CJ showed right now, you will first have an object on its own, and then you would have an object out with a distractor item, and multiple distractor items actually. And you want to make sure the child can touch the object, only the object, and that makes the object called a target. Then everything else that you don't name is called a distractor. And then you do the same thing with a second target. And only at that point is where you can actually start to randomly rotate 2 targets. And so this is a process that's kind of important to follow. And if you don't follow this process, then the child starts to develop sometimes this thing called win, stay, lose, shift. Well, they'll just hit what they think they should hit. And if you reward it, they'll keep going for that. And if you don't reward it, they'll switch.
Right.
So if they win, they'll stay. And if
but
they
they're not
lose,
actually learning.
They're not learning at all. They're just learning to shift their response.
Right.
And what we want them to learn is to listen to the label, to the word. So, this is really important, I think, that these guys designed the game with the discrete trial planning underneath it. And also, as CJ said, with the reinforcers, with the error correction procedures, the prompts, all that. It's great.
And then there's an extra, for people who are using skills, since I brought up skills, there's an extra added that you can do this in conjunction with your skills account, correct?
Yes, if you log into your skills account, there's the skills gamer token, which you can enter in here, and so it'll give you progress made in the game in your skills account.
Love it.
And so if you master something in here, then it can go back and fill your skills account and say, oh, this child mastered similar objects or whatever, mastered identical objects. And it's, I love how he says gamer token. This is their lingo, It's like, you get a gamer token.
It's remarkable. And I can see this being used in lots of different ways. For the family that's doing that intensive ABA and, you've got to get the child into the car to drive over to speech, instead of having them just fuzz out during that car trip, you put this in their hands and you're building on what they were just doing in the therapist. You're making it seamless, making all those opportunities.
Right. And of course, we didn't even have the sound on. And you have to realize this does have sound.
Yes.
And all the reinforcers have sound, and there's a vocal telling you what to do and so on. So it's very nice.
And if I can tell a secret, that one of the main voices that's used in this app is the voice of our fabulous Emily, that you always hear me saying, Emily, can we show this? Emily, can we do that? And can we turn it on for just a second so that they can hear? Emily does a remarkable job. I always say Emily is like that wonderful combination between MacGyver and Martha Stewart. Well, it turns out she's a perfect voice-over artist as well. Talking about using somebody's talents to the fullest. I don't know if we can, by the time we're done, get an opportunity to hear Emily reinforcing them and saying, touch this one and great job, and it's remarkable. And it's Emily's voice, not her own voice. It's a voice that she's doing, and it's slightly skewed as well, but.
I don't know if it's coming through. Is it? Because it's shared.
I don't think it's coming through for them. If we can't hear it here, we'd have.
If you want to hear it, you can grab community
help. You should absolutely download it for free. It's really remarkable. Whether you're using skills or not, it's a great thing to have on your devices. But I would encourage you, get your skills account too and maximize what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's so exciting, and of course there's more to come.
Yes, absolutely.
Much more to come.
So thank you for that. And I don't know if you want to mention, now that you're here, and I know we're always short on time, but real quickly, your stimulus project, or do you want to do it next time you're here? Your materials project.
I'll do that next time.
All right.
Okay. All right. We'll keep it a secret until then. Thank you so much for coming in and showing this to us. We're keeping you here because we're going to answer some more questions.
Sounds great.
We're not letting you go, but thank you so much for being here. We're going to take a break and come back with more of your questions for Dr. Granpeesheh. Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and I am here with the fabulous Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. We're doing Ask Dr. Doreen. We wanted to get back to some of your questions. Okay. So I want to start with a question, and there's just more. You guys are writing in more. We're going to hang on to some of them for next week. A 5-year-old, she says, hi, Shannon, my 4.5 6-year-old son is coming along really well. He's talking more and more every day. We still have many hurdles ahead. We work on a lot of things. However, the one thing that does not seem to be getting better is the stimming. He seems to clench his fists up and feels like a bolt of energy goes through his whole body. Did you ever see this with Jem, and did anything help? I feel like this is something the kids will tease him about, and don't know if diet or anything else will help us. Any suggestions would be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I do. Of course, over the years, I've seen hundreds of kids do that. This is one of two things. Okay, so it's either a surge of neurotransmitters, which a lot of our kids have this problem. So it's kind of like, it's like a shiver, right? And that's what happens to them. And if it is that, then you really should just get his everything tested. Just get a blood test, take a look, and make sure that all of his all the levels of various minerals and all of his toxicity is low, and that he doesn't have a lot of metals in him, and how is his all the various things that you check on the CBC. So I would do that. I would go see is this a family in California by any chance?
They did not tell us in fact, this particular circumstance.
This would be like just a very basic general check-in with a physician who is familiar with what to do with autism. So any of the MAPS physicians, Dr. Levinson is on the show in a few minutes, and you should discuss this with him. So sometimes it has something to do with that. Sometimes some of our kids have done that. I've seen it has to do with their retaining or retention of wanting to have a bowel movement. So it's sort of a encopresis is the term for it, and it has to do with controlling bowel movements. And I don't know what your child's GI system is like, or how many times a day they go, or if it's loose or solid or normal or what, but that's the other area that I would look into. Behavior, so that's in terms of dealing with the cause. Behaviorally, we've done with our kids, we've taught them how to, for instance, when they feel this urge coming up, to put their hands in their pockets, kind of sit on their hands, maybe even massage themselves, various things that'll help alleviate the need to do this. It's almost over, like almost everything else that happens with our kids. I think it's generated originally by some physiological thing, and then it becomes a learned behavior, kind of like tics.
Yes.
Tics are sort of initially started up, and then they become just generalized, and you start doing all kinds of tics. So I would treat it behaviorally the same way as you do with a tic, which is kind of have the person become more aware of it, and then to actually down-regulate it.
Okay, great. Next question we have is, what is the best way to handle a 6-year-old nonverbal autistic boy to prevent him getting sexually aroused when hugging women? My son is very affectionate, and sometimes he seems to get aroused when hugging women. I don't want to make him feel rejected.
Sure.
It's an important thing to talk about.
It is absolutely an important thing to talk about, and I would think that it isn't, arousal in association with women, I think, is learned. And so I don't know where he's been exposed to that, and you'd have to look into that and make sure he doesn't have exposure to anything that's not appropriate for his age. But also, you might want to check his testosterone levels and see if they're high, in which case they should be modified down. And then behaviorally, I think it is just a situation where you can, if he's aware of it, if he's able to understand, you will just tell him that it's not appropriate, and that you will want to explain to him why, which will be difficult unless he understands theory of mind or perspective taking, because really the reason that it's inappropriate is that it, for his age, would be to say it makes the other person uncomfortable.
Right.
So it's almost like, I guess an example could be if you gave him a hug that is so strong that he feels suffocated. That would be an example of what would make him feel uncomfortable, just so he understands that it's, would make the other person feel uncomfortable. And I don't know if it's just because of contact, if it's because of smell, if it's because what aspect of hugging other women evokes this.
Right.
And
Okay.
those are things you really have to find out. And
Okay.
the first thing is I would find out what his testosterone levels are.
Okay, good, important thing. And then another question that we had, good morning, question for Dr. Granpeesheh. My 5-year-old son is terrified of mannequins, which makes it a challenge to get out with the family. This issue arose just recently. We used to go lots of places where there are mannequins and he never noticed them, but now that he has become more aware of his surroundings, he has a complete screaming meltdown when he sees them or similar looking things. We've been doing outings with our current ABA provider to address the issue. There's been little improvement. We're in the process of switching to card. She has 2 boys. We're on the wait list for the Woodland Hills office. Can't wait. I'm not always able to listen to the program live, but I always listen later. I cannot thank the 2 of you enough for all that you do. I've learned so much from you both. Thank you. And then she goes on to note that she thinks that she may have seen me in a location last Sunday with Jem. And I will tell you that I can guarantee, because the location you said you did see us, I'm horrified because on Sunday mornings, I'm usually in that location, having just come from the farmer's market. Say hi to me next time, but be prepared for me to be fully embarrassed.
Is this a secret location that we're not supposed to?
I don't want to give it away. But in any case, it's usually I'm on the way to the community garden and I've gone to the farmer's market and I have mud all over me. I should not be out in public like that, but say hi next time.
That's awesome.
But it was us, I'm sure it was.
Terrific.
I hope I wasn't doing something embarrassing or that my child wasn't, right?
Not
but
at
it's
all.
keeping it real.
There's nothing embarrassing.
There's a lot that's embarrassing.
Never.
What are you talking about? Okay, so back to her question about mannequins.
Right, mannequin. This is very, very easy. This is a systematic desensitization procedure, which ABA terminology would probably say it's more like backward shaping. You will need to do that, period. So that means right now you'll make a list, and we can do this for you once you switch over to us, but it's easy. This is not a big deal. You will, what is your child's most calming, soothing activity? You have to teach your child something that will allow him to down-regulate. So whether it's music, I don't know, maybe drawing, humming to himself, it could be a variety of things, but meditation, breathing exercises, we do a lot of different things with our kids. You have to teach him that separately. That's phase 1, or phase 2 actually. Phase 1 is, while he's learning that, you will make a list of mannequin being the toughest thing to handle, or just like, physically being in the presence of a mannequin. And then the lowest on the list would potentially be a picture of, I don't know, something that looks like a mannequin.
Okay.
And then you will gradually increase the stimuli, have at least 10 to be like, so let's say below mannequin, like being right in front of a mannequin, would be being behind a glass shield where the mannequin is away from you in a glass thing. Or multiple mannequins might be the most scary thing.
Yeah.
And then one down from being behind a glass shield would be, they're in a glass shield and you're, let's say, on the other side of the street. You're pretty far. Another one would be watching them on TV or on a video. Another one would be, so on and so forth. A picture maybe being the last one or the easiest one. You start with the easiest one, which is the picture, and you literally have the picture in front of him and then have him exercise that thing that makes him calm. Whether it's breathing exercises or calming or whatever, or drawing, whatever it is. Once he feels completely comfortable with that, you go to the next stimulus and the next stimulus and the next stimulus, and you re-expose and you reinforce it and you shape. And so like he could be exposed to the stimulus for 5 seconds and you reinforce that, and then tomorrow for a minute and you reinforce that, and the next day for an hour, and he's done.
Right.
And then you go to the next level and you do the same thing. And it's a process. It'll take a little bit of time, but it's important to do.
Right.
My son was afraid of a billion different things. He's going to hate me for saying this, but the truth is he was. And I used to you can flood, which is very difficult, and put the child in front of that, or you can shape.
Yeah.
And I remember one week in Maui, we spent a whole week in Maui, and from the very beginning to the end of that week, all I accomplished was getting him into the ocean, actually, because he was so afraid of water at that point. So it was a process, and we had to go step by step every day a little bit closer.
And don't cut corners in the process. Take it as it comes. You'll end up in a good place. Really remarkable.
Right.